Pour un gars d'ici, être le directeur de général des Canadiens est une occasion d'une vie.
Enjoy the moment, you're in the NHL here.
Working for the Montreal Canadiens is a dream. La plus grande franchise dans la histoire du hockey.
If it was my last day on this planet, and you told me what would you like to do, I would want to be in that building on a Saturday night.
What is up, gang? Welcome to HABS Therapy Day, votre émission hebdomadaire, interactive et bilingue sur le Canadien de Montréal. No hot takes, no fake hype, just real talk, guys. Pas de rumeurs non fondées ou des faux débats, seulement des analyses solides. Smart hockey talk, deeper than the headlines, guys. We go a little deeper than the headlines. Un regard plus intelligent au-delà des manchettes. This is HABS Therapy Day. Let's go. Bienvenue à HABS Therapy Day. On commence. Welcome to the show, guys. It's great to be here. It's great to be able to do this, and I appreciate all of you who are here watching. Those of you who will watch in the replay, I appreciate that as well. We had a really, really fun and exciting show. The last episode, our guest was Marco D'Amico. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, I certainly invite you to go check it out. We did have a big surge in the number of people who watched the show. Marco obviously is somebody that people are interested in listening to, and with good reason. He put on a good performance, obviously, and he's a guy who has a lot of insight into the Canadiens and offers a real resourced, reasoned, objective take on the team. And we talked about the rebuild and why it's working and why it's likely to work. And it was really fun to talk to him about that. So if you haven't watched that yet, I invite you to go and check it out. It was a great show. We did enjoy it. If you're here today, watching the show here today, we're going to be talking about a training camp, Montreal Canadiens training camp, and some of the talking points, some of the storylines that will be front and center as the Canadiens begin their season with training camp in the next couple of weeks. So we're going to get to that in a second. Before we get started, guys, again, as usual, I'm going to invite you to please subscribe if you haven't already done so. The YouTube algorithm tells me that only about 25 to 30% of the people who are watching the show are actually subscribed. We did get some new subscribers recently. We are finally approaching the 500 mark, where we really want to try and get to that 500 mark, so that we can take advantage of some of the tricks and things that YouTube offers once you get to 500 subscribers. So if you're not yet subscribed, please do so. The button is just below me on the screen down here. Hit the notification bell if you haven't done that. And if you are enjoying the show today, give us a thumbs up, and that would be great. If you are watching in a replay, feel free to comment. Give us your feedback. Let us know what you think of the show. We did get some feedback previously. A lot of it had to do with the fact that the opening of the show, the replay of the show, took a really long time. Well, we air this show initially as a live show, so typically there is a lead up where I have the wait page I do eventually go back and edit that back so that it doesn't play for 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes. But that's the reason why that is on there and why the intro is the way it is. And also, I cut down on my intro here today. So without further ado, like I said, please follow. Si vous êtes intéressé à être partie de la conversation, si vous êtes intéressé à être partie de la famille Recliner Sports, touchez sur le bouton en bas pour devenir membre, pour souscrire à l'émission. On vous invite à faire ça. On serait bien heureux si vous serez partie de la famille. On peut certainement répondre à vos questions en français. Alors, si vous avez des questions ou des commentaires en français, demandez-les et on va vous faire notre mieux pour vous répondre en français. We are bilingual here, guys. If you do have French questions, feel free to fire away. Here, I see Thana Cha. Welcome to the show, Thana. Thanks for being here. So, guys, we're going to talk about Canadiens training camp. So, training camp is going to open up shortly. The rookie training camp will open a week from today on the 10th of September. That will be all of the rookies and the younger players will be there for that aspect of the camp. They have not announced the players that are invited to that camp yet. I'm not sure what that's going to look like. One of the interesting notes, like will Ivan Demidov be part of that camp or not? I would expect that Lane Hudson will not be part of that camp. I don't think that they'll have him participate in that aspect of the camp this year. I think Ivan Demidov probably will, but again, they have not yet released the list of the players who will be at that camp. We certainly, will see guys like Owen Beck and David Reinbacher and Vincent Rohrer is going to be there. David Engstrom, Sean Farrell. A lot of the guys from the AHL team last year will be there. Some of the guys who won't be there are, for instance, the NCAA players will not be there. The Michael Hages, guys like who else? All of the college guys. Anybody in the NCAA, they won't be there. You're probably the majority of the European guy. Alexander Zhuravsky won't be there. Bogdan Konushkov won't be there. The players in Russia have already started their preseason, and they will not be at the rookie camp. You would have had the opportunity to see those guys at the development camp in July. Part of the rookie training camp is what is being called the Canadiens Prospect Showdown. That will take place on the 13th and 14th of September at the Bell Center. 4 teams will participate: the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Ottawa Senators, the Winnipeg Jets, and of course the Montreal Canadiens. There will be 4 games played in total. Each team will play 2 games. The Canadiens will play against the Jets on the evening of September the 13th at 7 p.m. at the Bell Center. And then they will play the Toronto Maple Leafs in the afternoon on the 14th of September. So that'll be an opportunity to see the Canadiens rookies play against the rookies from the Winnipeg Jets and from the Toronto Maple Leafs. So that should be something to look forward to if you're in Montreal. Probably a good opportunity to get in and see the Bell Center and see the players. And it'd probably be at a reasonable price. I don't know what the tickets are going for that preseason or prospect showdown. But it would be an interesting thing and a fun thing to go watch if you're in Montreal. If you're not in Montreal, I suspect there'll be some sort of television coverage of that, whether it's on RDS or if they do something like a YouTube feed or something like that. I don't know how they'll do that this year. So the rookies will be playing on the 13th and 14th, and then on the 15th, I believe that's a Monday, will be the Canadiens Children's Foundation golf tournament, right? The famous golf tournament, which is typically the curtain raiser, the opener, the sign that the season is about to start. It's the precursor to training camp. Every year they do it. It's a big fundraiser. All of the players go, all of the coaches go, the management's there, and it's an opportunity for them to raise money for the Children's Foundation, corporate sponsors. All that good stuff. So, you often will get a lot of good interviews. Of course, last year you got the famous misinterpreted in the mix press conference that everybody kind of latched onto and kind of carried through the season last year. You heard, that from Jeff Gorton and from Kent Hughes and from Jeff Molson. Those guys will all speak again this year, as will, Marty St. Louis. You normally get conversation from the captain. So Nick Suzuki normally will speak, and then you'll get various players who will speak as well. And again, it's an introduction to the season, and it kind of is. It marks the beginning of the season. The actual training camp will be between the 18th of September to the 4th of October. Again, you'll see. Basically, that's when you'll see the players from the rookie camp who did well enough to get an invite to the big camp, and then of course you'll see all of the regulars who were on the team last year, as well as the new players who were added during the off season. There will be 6 preseason games this year. There's a game on the 22nd of September against the Pittsburgh Penguins, the 23rd of September against the Philadelphia Flyers, back-to-back games against the Toronto Maple Leafs on the 25th and 27th of September, and then back-to-back games against the Ottawa Senators on the 30th of September, and then the last game on the last day of camp on the 4th of October. Those games should be interesting. Last year's training camp was a little bit interesting in the sense that we saw a couple guys get injured, and we saw some storylines with respect to fighting and running around and throwing big hits and all that kind of stuff. So it should be interesting to see how that turns out, and the training camp in that respect will be fun to watch and interesting and exciting. But beyond that, there are a few storylines. I'm going to go through 5 different storylines that I think will play out during the training camp, things that I'm looking for, things that maybe you should be looking for, and I want to talk to you about those. We'll talk. Like I said, there's about 5 different topics here. If you have any questions or you have anything that you want to talk about, I'm certainly, I'm not here to talk at you. I want to talk with you. I'm here to have an open conversation with you guys. So if at any point during the show you feel like you want to jump in with some questions or some comments, I'm certainly willing to to break away from the prepared material and answer your questions and have a conversation. So the first storyline out of this year's training camp is what I've called to be continued. So to be continued, I've identified 3 different players: Lane Hudson, Nick Suzuki, and Cole Caulfield. And what I mean by to be continued is, are these guys going to be able to sort of pick up where they left off last year and continue their progression towards becoming, the players that they're capable of becoming, right? So Nick Suzuki, this season, I think we'll all look for him to continue his development, his ascent to becoming, a top player in the league. He had a slow start last season. The entire team had a slow start last season, but it'll be interesting to see if Nick Suzuki can come out of the gates a little bit, stronger or faster or more solidly than he did last year. And training camp in that sense will be interesting to see what his training camp looks like. Despite, still being relatively young, Suzuki is a veteran now, so he probably has a pretty good idea now of what's needed of him and what's required of him. And not to say that he slacks off during training camp. I don't think that's at all, but he sort of knows how to sort of pace himself a little bit, so that when the season starts, he's ready to go. And it'll be interesting to see how he takes on training camp. It'll also be interesting to see as he continues to grow and develop into the role of captain and the leadership that he brings to the group. It'll be interesting to see how that plays itself out during training camp. And of course, how he moves into the season. He's poised. I think that he's certainly solidified himself as a top level center in the NHL, two-way center. 89 points last year, and one of the better defensive centermen in the league. I think he can certainly, he still has room to grow, and it'll be interesting to see this year whether he does grow, whether he can make that leap to the next level where he becomes perhaps a 100-point guy. Whether he can get into that conversation with the the most elite centerman, right? We saw a few different outlets this year rank him in and around the top 10 of the top centers in the league. Now the question is, can he make the jump even higher where he gets in the conversation with the top 3 to 5 centermen in the league. And, is he able to take that jump? I mean, I don't know that he has to take that jump for the Canadiens to be successful. I think he's already proven that he's capable of being a high-level number one center in the league. But again, to be continued. Can he continue to go on that upward trajectory and become something even more? Again, keeping along the lines with the upward trajectory discussion, Cole Caulfield, right? Is Cole Caulfield, is he going to continue that upward trajectory? Last year, we certainly saw his goal scoring touch return. I think he ended up with 37 or 38 goals. After having, a bit of a down year on a goal scoring perspective the year before. What we did see from him last year also was a lot more well-rounded game, right? He was helping his teammates a lot more. He wasn't just a sniper, right? He was getting more assists. He was setting up his teammates. He was playing better defensively. He was, better in situations like puck retrieval and in the sort of, the forechecking game, adapting to the Canadian systems. And, I think we saw a much more well-rounded player last year in Cole Caulfield. And, certainly after, taking a year to sort of work on other aspects of his game, that sort of came to fruition last year. And again, the question, much like Suzuki, is does that upward trajectory continue? Do we see Cole Caulfield continue to be a better player? Do we see him to even increase his production? Does he get over that 40 goal plateau? He was on a pretty good pace to get there last year, and he kind of leveled off a little bit at the end of the year. And does he continue to improve his all-around game, right? And does that line of Suzuki, Caulfield, and Slafkovsky continue to be very productive and be one of the best, in the NHL? So, can Caulfield continue that upward trajectory? Can he get in that 40-goal area where he becomes an elite goal scorer in the NHL? The USA team for the Olympics. He was invited to the orientation camp. Does he? Does he make that step to become part of that conversation? All interesting things to look for this year from Cole Caulfield. As far as training camp goes, Caulfield wasn't really around a whole lot during training camp. We saw a lot of, during the summer, we saw a lot of the players stuck around in Montreal and were out in Brossard training and practicing over the summer. Cole Caulfield wasn't one of those guys, so it will be interesting to see what his off season was like and how he looks as he comes into training camp. And the third guy on the to be continued storyline is Lane Hutson. Obviously he has a shorter track record than the other two, Caulfield and Suzuki, but again, he's a guy who I think it will be interesting to see right from the get-go whether he continues to build on that season he had last year. Winning the Calder Trophy, 66 points in 82 games last year, averaging 22 minutes and around 45 seconds, so just under 23 minutes per game. Obviously having a historic rookie season. Played quite spectacularly, had a great season. How does his second year look, right? Does his sophomore year improve on last year? Does he take a bit of a step backwards? Does he stay the same? Like what does that look like? If he continues to move upwards, then I think you're looking at a guy who, in a couple years could end up being in the conversation with the best defenseman in the NHL, right? If he continues to be a guy who scores, 70-ish points a year and more, and then continues to work on his defense. I mean, there's a perception out there that he's not a good defender. And he certainly, struggled through the first half of the season last year. But if you look at his statistics and his numbers through the second half of the year, his defensive game improved enormously to the point where he was one of the better defenders in the league for the last 20 or 25 games of the season. Unfortunately, a lot of the national pundits, commentators haven't really looked that deeply into Lane Hutson to understand that about him. And so if that side of his game continues to improve, and there's no reason to believe it won't. I mean, we know he was one of the guys who was on the ice quite a bit over the summer. We saw last year that he was a guy who was continually working on his game. he's always, learning from his mistakes, learning from his experiences, and getting better and trying to do more, not just for himself but for the team. He's a very self-aware player, right, and knows what he needs to do to help the team. And I think in that sense, it's I expect that it's unlikely that he'll regress. But again, the question is, what does his trajectory look like, and what will he look like in training camp? Obviously the league has had a year to adjust to him as well, right, and to learn how to defend him and to play against him. And so the question then becomes, how does this season look for him? So it will be interesting to see how Lane Hutson shows up to training camp this year. So those are the three guys that I have to be continued, right? Lane Hutson, Cole Caulfield, and Nick Suzuki. Do they continue their upward trajectory where they continue to build on their successes over the past couple of years? In Hudson's case, the last year, and become even better and play a bigger role on the Montreal Canadiens and helping the Montreal Canadiens, eventually move towards their ultimate goals. Join if you're over there on TikTok, guys, come on and join us on YT if you have questions. I can't answer questions on both venues, but if you want to come over and join the YT channel, it's the same address, Recliner Sports. I believe it's Recliner Sports 4. Pop on down here and ask the question over here, and then we can certainly address your questions over here. The next question, or the next storyline, guys, for me is I've titled it, "Can they do it?" So question marks, right? These are two guys who I've identified as being big, not just question marks heading into training camp and next season, but also guys who are pivotal in the the direction that the Montreal Canadiens rebuild goes, right? So Kirby Dach and Alex Newhook are, to me, the two guys who can make a huge difference if they can play up to their potential and can sort of, force the Canadiens management into making some decisions if they can't do it, right? If they can't, get to that level where, they were projected to get to, both first-round draft picks, both guys who've shown potential, both guys who have a ton of ability. But the question is, can they do it on a regular basis in the NHL? And again, like I said, they're pivotal in the sense that if they can, then it's a huge, like, if Kirby Dach can live up to his potential and be the player he's capable of, the player we saw in the second half of 22-23 season, the guy we saw for about a month after the Christmas break last year, if he can become that guy, the guy that he's, certainly capable of being, a guy who's very good off the puck, who, is good along the boards, wins battles, makes good decisions, potentially a, 65, 70 or more point guy. If he becomes that, then, any questions about the second line center disappear, right? I mean, not only have you found your second line center, but you found one who is at an elite level, in the NHL. But if he isn't able to meet that level, if he isn't able to improve and get to that potential, then, maybe, if he, he could be anything from, what we had last year or what the team had last year, where, he struggled for the better part of the year. And, he filled the role of second line center, but certainly didn't excel there. And so, if he's not able to improve on last year and to find that spark that, allowed him to get drafted first overall, allowed him to be captain of the Canadian team at the World Juniors, then again, I don't think it leaves the Canadiens without a second line center, but it certainly leaves them with some questions at second line center about whether or not, he's capable of being the guy who can carry them, to where they want to be, to what their ultimate goal is as the second line center. And, whether or not they need to find, somebody either within the organization or outside of the organization to fill that role. And I think obviously the perfect world is Kirby Dach does become that player that they envision that he will be, and that those questions will all disappear, right? And again, the overriding theme of any training camp, is anything can happen. Expect the unexpected, right? Like last year, did anybody think that Emil Heineman was going to make the team coming out of camp and that Joshua Roy was going to go down to the AHL? Did anyone think that Oliver Kapanen was going to be on the team at the end of camp? It is what it is. But so Dennis says, I'm really losing faith in Doc. A change for both might be beneficial. Yeah, and I don't think we're there yet, Dennis. I don't agree with that. I'm sorry. I understand the frustration. I understand perhaps that you're losing faith. But again, the situation is a little bit more complex than that. I mean, here's a guy who's had 2 injuries. Here's a guy who, I think struggled a little bit with his confidence last year, perhaps struggled a little bit with his fitness last year, which, is probably, part of that is excusable, part of it's not. I do think that this is a big year for Kirby Dach, and this is a year where he's going to have to prove what the rest of his NHL career is going to look like, and whether, it's going to be in a significant role with the Montreal Canadiens, or whether it's going to be in a lesser role with the Montreal Canadiens, or whether it's going to be somewhere else. But I don't think that it's time to make a change. I mean, for a number of reasons. One, he's under contract. Two, his marketability right now is probably at an all-time low. So as far as trading him goes, the return that you would get for him, is probably not going to be a whole lot. So I think, again, I know that it's easy to be down on Kirby Dach after last year. However, I think, it's, if you're being objective about it, I think, it's worth your while to give some thought and to go back and look at what kind of player he was coming up, and what kind of player he was, sort of towards the end of, 22, 23, right? Heading into the 23, 24 season, a lot of people were talking about whether or not Kirby Dach was going to supplant Nick Suzuki as the number 1 center, right? That's how well he played at the end of the 22-23 season, right? A lot of people questioned whether or not it was Kirby Dach who was going to be the number 1 center, and whether Nick Suzuki was going to be bumped down. So again, I appreciate that, obviously that year didn't turn out to be much because he played a game and a half before being injured, and then last year was what it was. But there's potential there, and I don't think the Canadiens are at the point now where they're going to give up on Kirby Dach. Nor do I think they should. Again, patience is a virtue. Patience is probably the greatest characteristic or quality you can have in a rebuild, and the Canadiens have shown that. And I think they're far less inclined to give up on players than the fans are. And that could apply to a number of guys on the team who the fans, seem to, have given up on. The next guy here who I think plays a pivotal role this year is Alex Newhook, right? Does he have a breakout season? Is this the year that Alex Newhook, finally breaks through and becomes that player that everyone thought he could be when he was drafted, I think 15th overall a few years back? Last year, he showed definite signs of being close to breaking out. I don't think anybody on the team was more snake bitten offensively than he was. I don't think anybody, hit more posts or failed to capitalize on really good scoring opportunities. What I do think he did last year was improve his defensive game, enormously. He's learning to use his speed on the defensive side of the game and not just as an offensive tool. I think he probably realizes that if he wants to be a part of this team, it's probably in a third-line role, in which case he needs to be a good two-way player. He needs to be, better on the forecheck. He needs to be a better puck retriever. He needs to be a guy who, can use his speed to force turnovers and to move the puck and be a transition type guy, right? And so, in that sense, I thought he had a pretty good year last year. Although, I would certainly, agree or understand that, he did certainly struggle offensively, and that, he has more in the tank as far as offensive production goes. And I think it will be interesting to see what that looks like, both in training camp and as the the regular season starts. So anyways, I didn't thank you for the question, Dennis. I really appreciate you coming over and asking the question. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with your take on getting rid of Doc at this point, but I do understand the frustration. So Tyler also has a question about Kirby Dach. Tyler Brito, who is a regular and has been here before. Kirby Dach is rumored to not be good enough to play between Demidov and Laine. Okay, I'm not sure what you mean by rumor. I mean, I'm sure that's the opinion of some people, that he's not good enough to play that role. I don't agree with that. I think that if he plays the way he played in the first 3 months of last year, then he's probably not the best option to play with those guys. If he plays the way he, like, again, I'm repeating myself here, but if he plays the way he did when he was at his best, then I think he's certainly very capable of playing with those guys. I mean, he just, like I said, last year I think was a mental struggle for Kirby Dach. Hopefully the summer was a good break for him. Hopefully he was able to, get his body in a better place, heading into this season than he did last season. And certainly playing with Laine and Demidov, who, have been practicing together all summer, that would be, playing with those guys, it can't hurt to play with those guys. Those are two spectacular hockey players. I think that Dach potentially could be a very good centerman for those two players. So is he good enough to play with those guys? Absolutely. He is good enough, 100%. But he has to play as good as he's capable of playing in order to be able to take on that role. If he can't get back to where he's capable of being, whether it's because of the injuries or because he just doesn't have it, then yeah, he probably isn't the right guy to play between those two on the second line. So there's your can they do it? The question. You see the Riddler there asking, can they do it? Can Newhook and Dach be the players they're capable of and fill the roles that they're capable of filling on this team? And yeah. That's a big question heading into training camp. Jimmy 2 times asked a question which I suspect is a trolling question. I don't think it really means it, but I'll address it in any event. Do I think Demidov will be as good as Kotkaniemi or Pezzetta? Yes, I do. I certainly think he will be significantly better than Michael Pezzetta was last year. I would say that the odds of him being better than Jesperi Kotkaniemi are pretty strong. Again, nothing is guaranteed. He has only played a handful of games in the NHL up to this point, and again, I'm not gonna guarantee anything, but I would expect that at this stage of their careers, Demidov has had more success, and Demidov certainly projects to be better than Kotkaniemi currently is. But again, anything can happen, right? That's the overriding theme. Dennis Crocker. All right, guys, we got a lot of questions coming in here now. I want to answer some of these questions, but I'm not going to answer the same things over and over again. Dach's value may be underrated considering the lack of centers in the league. Some club might be willing to take a chance on him. Yeah, but again, the value, Kirby Dach's value to the Montreal Canadiens is far greater than it is to any other team in the NHL right now. I don't see the reason why you would trade him right now. Again, I understand the frustration. I understand that there's a lot of fans out there that just don't like him. I would sort of invite you to, put away the emotional response to the way he played last year and sort of take a more objective view and look at it and wonder, what would this team look like if Kirby Dach becomes the player that he's, capable of being. And I think that is a pretty exciting prospect for me. Tyler, do you think Reinbacher had a good camp? Does he have a strong argument to make opening night? If so, who sits, in my opinion? Well, I'm going to get to Reinbacher here in a bit, Tyler, under one of our other topics. I guess camp hasn't started yet, Tyler. So, so yeah, I don't. Maybe you're under the impression that camp has already happened, but it has not yet. But yeah, we will get to Reinbacher and him being a storyline as we move on in the show here. Dennis Crocker says Newhook has all the moves. He just struggles to finish, as you say. Yeah, I think that's probably a decent assessment. He's still quite young, and so players at the age of 23, 24 are often not the players they are at age 27, 28. So the question is, can Newhook find that finish that he perhaps doesn't have at the moment, but certainly has shown previously in his career, and has shown that he's capable of that. So yeah, that's why I say, right, that's the question, right? Can he do it? Can he take that jump? Can he find that magic? Can he find that scoring touch and take advantage of that? And again, I think more importantly with Newhook is that he's done similar thing that Cole Caulfield did the year before, where he, realized that, he needs to improve his defensive game and he has to, be a little more of a well-rounded player, and, is using his speed now on the defensive side of the equation. Breakout, the next topic, breakout, right? Who's going to break out this year? Who are the breakout players for the Montreal Canadiens? And to me, I've identified two, Caden Gooley and Uri Slafkovsky. I don't think that's groundbreaking news that either of those guys are poised for a breakout situation. Those are the two guys that I think certainly have the potential, who've played very well in their first couple years in the league, but certainly have the potential to take things even to another level, right? So with Caden Gooley, obviously, one of the biggest question marks with him is always going to be whether he can stay healthy. Last year's injury, was more than a fluke. It was a bit of a weird injury that, you don't expect to see. But, it is what it is. But, other than the time he spent on the injured list, Caden Gooley looked really, really good, right? Like he, certainly improved his game. He started to bring the physical side of his game. Like, there were a few, he was one of the more physical defensemen on the team. He used his speed, excellent skater, not the biggest defenseman in the world, but, big enough and more than willing to use it, right? More than willing to use his physicality and his size, right? So the question is, can he break out from that, right? He's, along with Slafkovsky, he's a young veteran, right? He's played over 100, what has he played, 125 games or so? Let me just be sure I have that right. Caden Gooley, Hockey DB. Yeah, he's played 169 games already in the NHL, and he's still only 23 years old, right? Uri Slafkovsky, he's played 200 games in the NHL. He's just 21 years old. So, these guys are, we talk about the young players on this team, and, we've always considered Gooley and Slafkovsky to be amongst those young players, and they still are young, but in the grand scheme of this organization, they're both guys who, are now considered young veterans, right? They've got NHL experience, right? They're not, they're going to have more experience than Lane Hudson. They're going to have more experience than, a David Reinbacher if he jumps into the situation. They've got more experience than, Jaden Struble and Arbor Jackeye and some of the younger players, if Owen Beck or Joshua Roy or Oliver Kapanen, like these guys are, going to be looked for some level of leadership, right? And they're going to be looked to sort of grow into that role, especially as, some of the, the guys like Mike Matheson and Brendan Gallagher and Josh Anderson start to be phased out, right? As they, start to age out and, they're the leaders now, and these are the guys that are going to step into that role. So, is Caden Gooley ready to become that top level first pairing defenseman? Is that where he's going to be, right? Is he going to be a top pairing defenseman, or is he going to be a second pairing defenseman, right? Like a guy like Caden Gooley, if he's your second pairing defenseman, you probably have a pretty good defensive core, but is he capable of, even being more than that? Like, is he capable of being, a a Shea Theodore, a Pietrangelo type of player, right? Is he a guy who can be a shutdown type defenseman, a big body, who can wear you down, throw big hits, be a physical presence, win battles along the board, just be that solid defensive defenseman, and can he improve his offense, right? Can he become, a guy who scores 10 to 15 points or gets 10 to 15 goals or gets 30 to 40 points? Can he become that guy? And if he does become a Shea Theodore or a Theodore Pietrangelo type guy, Colton Parayko, those kind of guys, then you're comfortable having him as your, shutdown number one pairing defenseman. But, again, if he then plays like that, if he plays like, the great teams always have guys playing a level below what they're capable of, right? So if Gouli is capable of being a first pairing defenseman, but you're able to play him on your second pairing, that's a sign your team's pretty good, right? That's a sign your team's pretty solid. So if Gouli can be that guy and be your second pairing guy, and you've got, let's say Hudson and Reinbacher as your first pairing, and then you've got Gouli and Dobson as your second pairing, you're in pretty good shape. So that's the question for Gouli for me is, can he take that next step? He's obviously been very good in his first few years in the league, but can he take that next step to be becoming, a key component of this team when it becomes, a perennial contender? So if you're over on TikTok, guys, join us on YT. The channel is Recliner Sports 4. We're live over here. If you have questions and you want to ask them, then I certainly invite you to join us over here. I see there were a few questions. I'm not able to answer questions on both platforms at the same time, but if you do come over here and ask them, I certainly can respond. We got a question here, another one from Dennis regarding Arbor Jacki. If I think Jacki becomes more valuable with the movement of Pezzetta. I think Jacki's valuable, regardless. I don't think that the movement of Pezzetta necessarily changes things for Jacki. Jacki is a guy who brings a very unique skill set to the team, and it's why I think his position with the team is a pretty solid one. Obviously there's going to probably be defensemen who are arguably better than him within the organization as far as, their pure hockey skills are concerned. But Arbor Jacki brings an element that nobody else in the organization is capable of bringing. And if he can harness that, then I think he has enormous value to this team, right? If he can learn how to play the enforcer role in the modern NHL, and I may do a show on this. It's something I've thought about quite a lot already. If he can revolutionize the enforcer role in the NHL and sort of abandon some of the traditional approaches to that role, and sort of be smart about it and be aware about it, and bring intimidation and violence with intention to the game, then I think that Arbor Jacki has the ability to be a very, very significant player on a good hockey team, right? So, if he can learn to take the emotion out of the enforcer role and like I said, be violent and be physical and be intimidating with intention, with intent, right? Not act out of emotion, but act out of intent, and be a guy who sets the tone, guy who makes hits when they're available but doesn't necessarily go out and chase them, who doesn't take bad penalties, who is a step ahead of the rest of the game, the other players, as far as the physical and violent aspects of the game, not having to drop the gloves immediately after a guy makes a dirty play against your team, like taking somebody's number and sorting it out later, or even being preemptive about it, being preemptive about, setting the tone so that the other team knows not to do those things in the first place. But again, that requires a real, it requires a certain kind of player and a hockey IQ that not everybody has, right? It's hard to take emotion out of the game, especially a game like hockey. But again, that's I've gone on quite a bit about Jack-Eye there. But to me, that's where I see Jack-Eye. And I think it's where the Canadiens see Jack-Eye. Yeah, I mean, I could do an entire show on that sort of the the transformation or the what's the word I'm looking for? Like evolving the enforcer role, because the old enforcer role, the old enforcer has no role in the NHL anymore, in my opinion. There's no role for even a Ryan Reeves anymore in the NHL. There's no role for those types of players, right? As a player who has some ability and some skill and can skate and whatever, and has a good shot, and certainly has a high is a quick learner, has a late bloomer who's developed a lot in the last few years. To bring that other aspect of the game, if Jack-Eye can harness all of that, I think he's a guy who could really help the Canadiens. So are you guys getting back to breakout? Another breakout player this year, Slafkovsky, obviously. Questions with Slafkovsky is he going to be ready to start the season this year, right? He's had good seasons already, 50 and 51 points in the last two seasons. But numbers were significantly better and performance was significantly better in the second half of both of those seasons. For whatever reason, he struggled in the first half of the last two seasons. The question is, can he put in an entire season? And if he does, what does that look like, right? Does he become a premier power forward in the NHL if he can bring an entire season of what we've seen sort of after Christmas in each of the last two seasons? A guy who is, I don't want to say he's near on a point per game, but certainly is a guy who, if he gets on that pace, certainly will improve on 50 points and sort of be more of a 70 to 75 point guy if he can play the way he's played in the second half of the season for an entire season. More than that, though, he needs to learn to use his size. We saw a little bit more of that in the second half of the season last year. Obviously, a lot was made out of his, comments where he said he wanted to play more like Brady Tkachuk and all that. And, you can argue that all you want. I don't know that Brady Tkachuk is necessarily the best role model for him, but he, learning to use that big frame, right? One of the things that makes Juraj Slafkovsky special is that in addition to the skill set that he also has the body, right? The 6'3", 230-pound body. Not a lot of guys with bodies like that can do the things that he can do on the ice with the skating and his passing and so on. So, he needs to be a guy who plays, like a 6'3" guy and not like a 5'10" guy. And better on the forecheck, board battles, puck retrieval, all that stuff. Obviously, as he gets a little bit older and gets a little bit more experience, you'll hopefully see him make better decisions. Sometimes last year, I think we saw him struggle with some decision making. I think that was something that happened across the board as the players sort of adjusted to some new systems that Marty St. Louis brought in. But I think as Slafkovsky gets a little bit more comfortable and confident, Slafkovsky is a perfect example of a 21-year-old hockey player who, when their confidence is high, they can do just about anything. But when their confidence is low, they can look really, really bad. And so I think, the more he can build his confidence and sort of have some success and build on that, I think that could be a pretty fun and interesting thing to watch at training camp and hopefully into the season. And of course, with a Juraj Slafkovsky firing on all cylinders for an entire season, what does that mean for Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield, right? A guy who's going to win those battles on the boards, behind the net, all that kind of stuff, getting pucks, turning pucks over, creating, chances in the other team's end, can only have a positive approach or a positive result, I guess. Tyler says, if Slafkovsky starts in October, 60 to 70 points will happen. He's young, he's growing. Each season he's gotten better. Yeah, I agree. And it's, exactly my opinion on this. Right. I think, obviously if he plays an entire season the way he played the second half of last season and the season before, you're probably talking more like 70 to 80 points, to be honest. because he got to 50 points without really doing a whole lot in the first half of the season. So, but again, I think it's for him, it's also about being a presence out there. I think one of the things that I remember was when he first got drafted, they were talking to him about, what kind of player he wanted to be. I think this might have even been in his draft interview. And it was funny because he didn't talk about being a goal scorer. He didn't talk about being a two-way player. He didn't talk about that. He talked about wanting to be an impact player, right? Having an impact on the team and having an impact on the game. And that's the kind of player that Slafkovsky can be if he can learn to, incorporate all of his tools into his game, right? And the other thing about Slafkovsky, 200 games, right? Like everyone talks about Slafkovsky, this, that. 200 games, he's still only 21 years old. Like he won't be 22 until next March. So 111 points in 200 games, all of these conversations about Slafkovsky being a bust. I mean, we can put that away. I think that's kind of silly. Slafkovsky is our new Pacioretty. I think he's more than that, Tyler. I think he's more than that. I think he has the ability to be substantially better than Pacioretty was. I mean, don't get me wrong, Pacioretty was great, but I think that Slafkovsky has the potential to be something pretty special. All right, next topic, guys. The kids are all right. So heading into training camp, we're going to get to see some of the kids play at the NHL level. How will they look in relation to the NHLers that they'll be going up against in training camp, whether it's in the preseason games or whether it's, in the on-ice training stuff and whatever. So, we've obviously heard a ton about all these guys. Ivan Demidov, David Reinbacher, Adam Engstrom, Owen Beck, Joshua Roy, Florian Jacki, all kinds of these, they're all out there, and they're all going to get a chance this year. Like I said earlier, expect the unexpected. This is, last year, who would have expected Heineman and Kapanen to be on the team as camp ended and Joshua Roy to be headed back down to Laval? I don't think anybody would have anticipated that. I certainly didn't anticipate that, but it happened. And, again, the kids are all right. I think Ivan Demidov is probably the guy who is, most likely to not have to worry about that. I'm not going to say that it's impossible for him to not make the Canadiens coming out of camp, but I'm going to say it's highly, highly unlikely. But the question with him is, how smooth is his transition to the NHL going to be, right? Is it going to be like Lane Hutson's was last year, where almost right away he looked like he was a regular and that he belonged there? That's rare. That doesn't happen, especially for defensemen. But even for forwards, for a guy to step in and just sort of contribute right away, that doesn't happen all the time. Like, when's the last time that happened on the Montreal Canadiens, right? Think of guys in the past who stepped in. Sorry, guys. Think of guys who stepped in as rookies right away and contributed to the team, and never went down to the minors or never struggled or never So what is Demidov's transition going to look like? Michkov, I guess, in Philadelphia last year gives us a bit of a blueprint as a guy who sort of had the same path to the NHL as Demidov did, and had similar, certainly offensive, I guess, numbers on the way up. And we saw what he did last year. He obviously had good numbers on the whole for the season, but again, there were parts of the year last year where he struggled. So it'll be interesting to see what Demidov, like we've seen him all summer on the ice, right? He's been very front and center in Brassard, at the practice complex, and we've seen him running drills. We've seen him out there with Patrick Laine. We've seen him out there with Lane Hutson. We've seen him out there with all these guys. But again, what's it going to look like when he's on the ice? In a preseason game or with other NHLers and playing in a more structured situation. What's that going to look like? Obviously, we had a glimpse of it last year, and he looked fine, which is I think encouraging because obviously now he's had an entire summer to prepare. For those of you who know, before last season, he was coming off an ankle injury and didn't really have much time to prepare going into the KHL season, and had a pretty good year regardless. This year, he's obviously had all the time in the world. He stayed in Montreal. He was on the ice just about every single day, and was doing all kinds of training and practicing to prepare for this season. And so, one hopes that training will pay off, and that as a fan, it's going to be exciting to see what that training will look like. And again, I think for him, much like Lane Hutson, one of the things that I found spectacular about Lane Hutson last year was his ability to adapt and to improve his game, from a day-to-day basis, right? He would play a game and make a mistake and fix that mistake for the next game. He was a guy who was very self-aware, who understood his game, and knew what he needed to work on, and was able to do that, even from game to game. It wasn't just like, oh, well, Lane Hutson's not good at this, but we're just going to get. Well, no, if he wasn't good at it, on Tuesday, by Friday, he was better at it. Whether it was, mental mistakes and whatever, if we remember, I mean, his game transformed unbelievably last year. Like, he changed his game from game 1 to game 82. If you remember game 1, he was doing all the head fakes and the deking and the, trying to beat guys. He still does that, but, he took a lot of that out of his game, and it didn't affect, his performance. In fact, he improved, right? So he learned what he's able to do at the NHL level, and he learned what he's not able to do, and he learned that whole risk-reward conversation, with himself. And, because he is such an intelligent hockey player, he's able to, to think and make those decisions, in the spur of the moment. Tyler says, in my personal opinion, I'd rather see Florian Jacki up over Oliver Kapanen. I love both, but prefer, I assume you mean the unicorn. Yeah, I don't agree. I think in the long term, perhaps, Florian Jacki is a little bit more exciting, but keep in mind, Florian Jacki is, 1 year out of junior hockey. I think there's no need to rush him. There's no need to hurry. The Canadiens have now got themselves in a position where they don't have to rush players to the NHL. I like Florian Jacki, and I think what he did last year was really, really impressive. But I think that Florian Jacki is a guy who could become really, really special, with the right guidance and the right training and the right development. And I think the best place for him to do that at this stage, keeping in mind he's a 21-year-old kid, right? Is he 20 or is he 21? I think he is now 21, but I will check just to make sure that I'm right. Florian Jacki is 21 years old. He's a late bloomer, right? And doing things that nobody thought he was capable of, much like his brother. Like Arber Jacki making the Canadiens as a 19-year-old. Undrafted in the NHL, undrafted in junior. Guy who only started playing hockey later in life. These guys are on a late bloomer. Obviously Florian Jacki was drafted, but these guys are late bloomers, and they're showing really special. Their trajectory has been very, very much an upward grade, right? And I think Florian Jacki still would benefit enormously from time in the minors, and some of that more directed coaching and more of a developmental approach to his game, as opposed to sort of having to be on the ice every night in scenarios where the team has to win, right? The Canadiens are not at the point in their rebuild now where winning is not the ultimate goal, right? Now they want to win every night. And so, learning on the fly in the NHL for a player like Florian Jacki probably to me is not the best option. Yes, a guy like Demidov can do it. Yes, a guy like Lane Hudson can do it, but they're very different players than Florian Jacki is. And so for me, I think that the best place for him is in the American Hockey League. Would I love to see him come to training camp and, open some eyes and really, really, put a stamp on things and let people know that, I'm on my way, here I come. Yeah, I would love for that to happen. I would love for Florian Jacki to just come into camp and be, a bulldozer and go out there and play physically and prove that, the 24 goals last year in Laval were not a fluke, and that this is something that, that he's capable of, and that, I'm going to go down and, in a couple of years, you're going to have no choice but to put me on the roster. I would love for that to happen, but I just don't think that, I don't think that Jacki, in particular, Jacki over Kapanen makes any sense at this point of their careers. The next guy on the kids are all right is David Reinbacher. Again, the question here is he ready to make the jump to the NHL? Again, the one of the biggest benefits of the Dobson trade is that now you don't have to make any decisions about Reinbacher in a rush, right? You can take your time. Right now, you're not desperate to get a right-handed defenseman to the NHL. You've got Dobson now, so you can afford to give Reinbacher a little more time. Now, that's not to say he needs more time. Maybe he comes to camp and is the best defenseman in camp. He had a really good camp last year before getting injured in the exhibition game against Toronto, but then unfortunately missed the better part of the season. So, even though he is now, 3 years, going into his third year post-draft, he really hasn't played a ton of hockey just because of the injuries and what have you. So, would I like to see him, again, like Jacki, would I like to see him come to training camp and force the Canadiens to make a tough decision? Yeah, I think that would be great. But at the end of the day, maybe it would be better for him to spend another year in the American Hockey League, play an entire year healthy, be a leader, right? Play in a leadership role. I mean, he's a leadership kind of guy, personality-wise. I think that's one of the things that attracted them to him at the draft. We saw that him playing with grown men in Cloton in the Swiss League and being a leader on that team, despite being by far the youngest player on the team. So I think him having an entire year in Laval where he can get into a routine, be a leader, probably would get a letter if he played down there, depending on what happened with some of the other guys. I think that would really, really benefit him and allow him to find his game a little bit. Again, much with all of these guys, really, whether it's Engstrom, Beck, Jacki, Roy, I would love to see all of these guys come to camp and really force management to make tough decisions. If they all show up and play their best hockey, then that would be great, right? Because at this point, the Canadiens are in a great position where they don't have to rush any of these guys. And as long as the communication is good and, being sent back down to the American Hockey League is not sort of perceived as a failure or a slight or whatever, then I think that's a good place to be, right? And I think Montreal is good at that. Montreal is good at, the communication game, with the American Hockey League team being in Laval, so close to Montreal. There really seems to be a lot of synergy between the coaching staffs and the development team, on Laval and Montreal, and there is a lot of sort of interplay there. And so I don't think that being sent down to Laval, especially in this organization, is kind of seen as the failure or the demotion that perhaps we thought it might have been, in years past, if that makes any sense. Adam Engstrom, again, another guy who, is going to be playing the numbers game, right? Left-handed defenseman. The Canadiens have a group of left-handed defensemen. But would I like Adam Engstrom to come to camp and force the Canadiens to make decisions? Absolutely. right? Would I like him to come to camp and be good enough where, that he can compete and get in the conversation with guys like Arbor Jackeye and Jaden Struble and Mike Matheson? Yeah, that would be awesome, right? Like right now, I think if you look at the depth chart, he's behind all three of those guys. But what happens if he can sort of leapfrog one, two, or three of those guys, all of those guys? Like what happens if he, proves that he's a better NHL defenseman than, Struble or Jackeye or Matheson? Does he become a valuable trade asset? Does he allow you to move on from, one of those other three? Like I'm not a big fan of the idea of moving Matheson right now, just because I think he brings a lot as far as, a steadiness and a leadership role on a pretty young defensive core. But, if like I said, I would love for all of these guys, and, if a guy like Engstrom comes to camp and proves that he's, a surefire NHLer, then, again, you have the option to send him back to Laval for a little more seasoning, or you create a conversation as far as the depth chart is concerned for your left side defenseman. Tyler has another question. Thank you, Tyler, for all the questions. I appreciate it. This is what I want to do, guys. If more of you should be asking questions like Tyler. Lane Hudson is going to take another step for not being invited to USA camp. 90 points, just passing to Demidov alone. Yeah, I mean, I think the likelihood is that he will continue to improve. I think he will definitely use the USA camp snub as a motivating factor. Something to motivate him. I don't know that he necessarily needs much of a motivating factor. He's the kind of guy who, appears to have a pretty strong work ethic anyway. But again, more motivation is always a good thing. I don't know that he'll get to 90 points this year. I think that might be a little bit, I mean, a little pie in the sky to think that he'll get to 90 points. But obviously, playing with Demidov will help. But I mean, he's, this team is getting better, right? Whether it's Demidov or whether it's, Laine, whether it's, Caulfield, whether it's Suzuki, whether it's Slavkovsky, whether it's, Zachary Bolduc, all these guys, right? As the team gets better, the players around them will get better, right? Like it's, you're playing with better players, it's your performance is better when you're surrounded by good players, right? If you don't have to worry about anything other than doing your own job because the guys around you are all very good at doing their job, then you can be better at your job. The last two guys I want to touch on real quickly on the conversation about the kids are Owen Beck and Joshua Roy. We've seen news out recently the last couple of days about Joshua Roy and all of the work that he's done over the summer to improve his strength. I don't know that physicality, I mean, somebody pointed out in one of the comment sections I saw that physicality or fitness was never a real question mark for Joshua Roy. But what I think might have been a question for Joshua Roy was work ethic. And again, I'm very hesitant to raise another person's work ethic, certainly in a critical way, because who am I to do that? And I'm not inside your head, and I don't know why. It's very hard, I think, to attribute somebody's failures or somebody's not getting to where they are trying to get to on a lack of work ethic or a lack of effort, because I don't know that person and I'm not around them all the time. But there has been questions about that. And certainly from what I saw, what the work that he was putting in at the gym this summer looked like a player who had pretty good work ethic. So if work ethic was a question or concern with Joshua Roy, and maybe that was one of the reasons why he didn't fare so well at training camp last year, then, that change will certainly bode well for him this year, right? And certainly, physically, he'll be heading into camp in a really good place. And I mean, we know Joshua Roy is a good hockey player. He had a spectacular junior hockey career. We saw him at the World Juniors playing on a line with Connor Bedard and doing very well there. We've seen, glimpses of his abilities at the NHL level. Very, very intelligent hockey player. Maybe not the best skater in the world, but certainly a very intelligent player, which, is a very important factor when you think about the style of hockey that this team wants to play, right? Mental quickness is almost as important as physical quickness for, playing in the systems and the style of play that Marty St. Louis is trying to bring to this team, right? That's, guys like Demidov, guys like Laine, guys like Hudson, guys like Suzuki, guys like Kovac, like these, like if you notice that it's an ongoing trend with players that the Montreal Canadiens are interested in. Guys that they draft, guys that they trade for, are guys with high hockey IQs. Guys who think the game quickly, guys who are able to make decisions quickly, and guys who, can do that, right? The transition game, guys who can look up and sort of, scan the ice and make a decision and do it, right? And, that's probably where a guy like Arber Xhekaj struggles a little bit, right? He doesn't have that high hockey IQ as a guy who is a bit of a late bloomer who didn't, take up hockey, in the traditional way as a 3-year-old skating on a pond in Saskatchewan, like a lot of Canadian kids, but, he makes up for that in a lot of other ways, right? And so, but, for a guy like Joshua Roy, he does have that high hockey sense that the Canadiens are looking for. Owen Beck is, to me, Owen Beck is just destined to be, that third or fourth liner for the Canadiens, whether it's as a centerman or whether it's on the wing. If he can play the kind of game he's capable of, we saw, he's just one of those guys. He's a leader. He's a grinder. He's an effort guy. He does all the right things. He has leadership. Did he win 2 Memorial Cups? I know he went to 2 Memorial Cups. He was the MVP when Saginaw won the Memorial Cup. This is a guy who just does what it takes, and he's the kind of guy who you want on your team. And he's the kind of guy, like when you build a team, obviously, your top line players, your first line guys are probably more important, but sometimes it's almost just as important to have role players and have solid guys in your bottom 6, right? Not just guys who weren't good enough to play in the top 6, but guys who are suited for those roles and are really, really good at it. Philip Deneau, would be a guy who, is, a perfect example of a bottom 6 guy. He can play in the top 6, but if you've got him playing in your bottom 6 with, the defensive style that he plays, plus a little bit of that offense that he can bring, those are the kind of guys that you need to be on a winning team. And Owen Beck, going into training camp, does he take the leap this year? Last year we saw him play a few games in the NHL. He didn't look out of place, but he also, clearly needed a little bit more work. Had a very good season in Laval last year. And going into camp, he'll compete with Oliver Kapanen, with Joshua Roy, with Sammy Blais. Florian Xhekaj, I think, is probably still a year away, like I said. But these are the guys, right? These are those role player bottom 6 guys. And frankly, if you're looking at, I was going to say Beck would have a step up on some of these guys, but Kapanen and Roy are pretty good too. So that should be an interesting battle to see how that goes. Personally, again, I think Owen Beck, is a guy who, you can afford to send him down to Laval for another year. He only has the 1 year in the AHL. Unless he really forces your hand, I don't think you really have any problem sending him down. Joe Veleno's in that conversation too. Joe Veleno doesn't have a great face-off percentage. He has a good face-off percentage. I believe he's somewhere, last few years, he's been somewhere between 47 and 49% in the face-off circle. But yeah, he does, hopefully play an important role there. We're going to get to him in a second, but yeah. So those are the kids, guys. Demidov, Reinbacher, Engstrom, Beck, Xhekaj, Roy. These are guys that going into camp are going to be fun to watch. There's going to be a bit of a battle there. The roster will be a little more established than it has been in previous years. As in the competition. Obviously, the first line is pretty all set, and there's probably 16, 17 roster spots that are pretty established, but it still will be fun to see these kids, see which of these kids are able to make that jump to the next level. So last storyline talking point heading into camp, and this is getting to your question here a little bit, Tyler. The new kids on the block. So we got 3 new kids on the block this year. Essentially, I haven't included Sammy Blais here as a new kid on the block. I guess I could have. But essentially, we've got Noah Dobson, Joe Veleno, and Zachary Bolduc. Noah Dobson, obviously the centerpiece of the offseason, the big trade, I guess. They got him for a pretty good deal. They've got him locked up for 8 years. How is he going to fit with the new team? Right, that's what I'm going to look for in training camp. How is he going to look heading into into the season? How does this training camp? Is he going to be a leader? Is he going to be a guy who establishes himself right away as one of the team's best defensemen, like right up there with with Lane Hudson? Is he going to be that guy? Like, is he the guy who scored 70 points 2 years ago, or is he the guy who had 39 points last year? I think he struggled a little bit last year with some of the systems that he was required to play in for the Islanders, and I think this will be a better year. I think he'll be the coaching of Marty St. Louis will suit him better than the coaching of Patrick Roy. Just my opinion. So I do look for him to be more of the 70-point guy than the 39-point guy. Who's his D partner? Is he? Do you partner him up with Lane Hudson and go for the Thunder and Lightning, like the offensive juggernaut, or do you partner him up with somebody with a little bit more defense? Like, are you going to put him out there with are you going to put him out there with Caden Gooley? They're both right-handed. Caden Gooley's lefty. You put him out there with Caden Gooley. Are you going to put him out there, with Mike Matheson? I have my opinions about Mike Matheson this year. I think Mike Matheson's going to take on a much more defensive role this year and focus on that aspect of his game. But that, again, is a conversation for another time. Power play. Is he on power play 1 or is he on power play 2? Right? Is it, I think he probably more likely is on power play 2 to start. But I think the Canadiens are going to be really interested in having 2 equally dangerous power plays next year. It's not going to be all about how powerful and how strong can power play 1 be. It's how powerful can both of our power play units be, so that we force the other team to sort of split up their penalty killers. Right? People that's an often misunderstood thing amongst Canadiens fans is the idea of if you have 2 really strong power plays, the other team, if they don't have 5 or 6 good penalty killers, then all of a sudden you've got a good power play going out against some average penalty killers, right? Which is why I kind of fought against the whole argument last year about Lane Hudson having to be on power play 1 right away. 1, I think he needed to take some time and get the experience, but 2, having him on power play 2, the power play unit 2, allowed the Canadiens to spread out that power play a little bit. And in fact, if you go back and look at the numbers, I think you'll see that the Canadiens power play was probably did its most damage early in the season. Their power, despite having a really slow start to the season, their power play early on was quite good when they had 2 good power play units going. Tyler has a question or a comment about Noah Dobson. Dobson scored the same amount of goals 2 years in a row. His point production was heavily impacted by the Islanders' play. I think you see Dobson back up to 70 points. Yeah, I tend to think that that's the more likely thing. I think there's a number of factors at play. I think the coaching will be a little more suitable to his game and personality in Montreal. And like I said, Marty St. Louis is a very different coach than Patrick Roy. I think he'll get more time on the power play, all that stuff. And I think he'll be more comfortable playing in Montreal. I think that this group will be good for him. I think that, I think he'll fit in really good with this group. He seems like, he has the personality and the attitude that seems to work with this group. Zachary Bolduc. So again, big questions about Zachary Bolduc. Not in a bad way, but in a good way, right? What is his role? What does he become on the Montreal Canadiens, right? Does he, he's still quite young, 22. Stand by. I believe he's 22. Yeah, 22 years old. He's still growing as a hockey player. Does he become the prolific point producer that he was in junior hockey? Right, a guy who had 110 points in 61 games for the Quebec Remparts, 99 points the year before that in just 65 games. So in 2 years, and about 126 games, he had 209 points. That's pretty impressive, right? So is he that guy, or is he the guy who sort of broke out last year, like that physical, forechecking kind of forward that turned things on in the second half of the season in St. Louis last year? I don't know. I think that he's capable of being a little bit of both, and if he is, then I think on a winning team, on a great team, he's an ideal third liner, right? A guy who brings offense, and a guy who brings physicality, and a guy who brings a sound defensive game, right? He's sound defensively. He plays both sides, and he's a great forechecker. All these things, right? He's a good hockey player, and I think he's still being molded into the NHLer that he's going to become, and he certainly has shown in his past, the capability of adapt. Again, self-awareness, right? I talked about this about Lane Hudson and about Ivan Demidov and about guys who are self-aware, guys who understand what they need to do, one, to help their team, and two, to be the best player they can be, right? Guys who like Josh Anderson, right? Josh Anderson came to the realization, not this summer, but last summer, that, in order for him to be the best player in the NHL that he's going to be, he has to change the way he plays. He has to change the way he perceives himself, and he has to understand that his role is going to be not as a 30-goal scorer, but more so as a forechecking third or fourth liner who can chip in a little bit of offense from time to time, right? Who uses his speed and his size to play the game, right? And, if Josh Anderson had continued to think that he was going to be a 30-goal scorer, then maybe, he doesn't help his team as much. And he doesn't help himself as much. But having realized that, Brendan Gallagher, same thing, right? Brendan Gallagher, when he came up, Brendan Gallagher was a point producer. And, obviously injuries had a big factor. But, Brendan Gallagher has prolonged his career and will stick around because he's, learned to be a contributor in other ways. So Zachary Bolduc is still learning that. What is he as an NHLer? But what is really encouraging and intriguing about him is that he, when faced with that, you have to figure this out if you want to play on this team, he was able to figure it out, right? Not only figure it out, but he was able to change his game significantly. Great article by Arpon Basu recently about Zach Bolduc. If you haven't given up your Athletic subscription like I did recently, then I certainly, Arpon Basu is definitely one of the reasons why you should keep your Athletic subscription. Whether or not Arpon Basu is enough reason to keep your subscription is up to you. But if you are inclined, he did write a really good article about Zachary Bolduc and the transformation that he made last year under Jim Montgomery, and what that looked like, and what have you. And to me, as much as it is important that Bolduc, became that player who forechecks and is more physical and whatever, which is, obviously fits very well into the Canadian system. The fact that he was able to identify a need to change in his game, or was told he needed to change his game, and then was able to do it, I think is a positive for the Canadiens. Does Bolduc play on the power play? Right, that's another one. Right, there's another opportunity for the Canadiens to really spread their power play out a little bit. Bolduc being that bumper player that the Canadiens really haven't had. I mean, Suzuki can play the bumper, and he has, and he's good at it, but Suzuki is more of a distributor from the bumper, whereas Bolduc is a sniper from the bumper, like more along the Braden point, right? Scoring goals from that bumper position. Quick shot, powerful shot, can get it away in a hurry, and can score from that, high slot on the power play. So, do you bring him into the first power play to play that bumper position, or do you put him on the second power play? Then all of a sudden your second power play, you've got two really good power plays. So the last guy we're going to talk about, guys, is Joe Veleno. Really interesting character, I think, Joe Veleno, for me. I think that, a lot of people just sort of view him as a sort of a tryout kind of guy coming to camp, but I think he's a guy who can really, really make some waves at camp this year, which is why I'm really, really interested to see what he can do. For two reasons. One, they need somebody who can replace the role that Christian Dvorak played last year. Dvorak, despite all of his naysayers, had a pretty good season last year. Certainly the second half of the season was pretty good. He struggled for the most part in his time in Montreal. Some of that had to do with injuries. But last year, I think he finally was healthy, and, he did some good stuff, especially, when you think of him as being sort of the go-to left-handed face-off guy. And that, if you want to talk about holes in the Montreal Canadiens lineup, I don't like that term because I don't think there are any holes. But a weakness in the lineup perhaps is the left-handed center. More so than a second-line center or anything else, I think the left-handed center is, losing Christian Dvorak is something that they're going to struggle to replace. And one of the interesting questions going into camp is going to be whether Joe Veleno can do that, whether he can be that guy. As Tyler pointed out earlier, Veleno has a decent face-off percentage over the years. Not good, not great. Still under 50%, but certainly, better than some of the other options as far as face-offs go. Better than a new hook. Better than Kirby Dach in the face-off circle. He also is a guy who hasn't played a ton of center the last couple of years, so maybe with more of a focus on that and a more of a focus on practicing the face-offs, he can improve that aspect of his game. Joe Veleno is a really, 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 really good hockey player. He's struggled to live up to his potential. He was a guy who, some of you will remember, exceptional status player in the Quebec League, was allowed to play in the Quebec League at the age of 15. Not very many guys received that. I don't know, how many other players? I know that I believe that Sidney Crosby got that, but there's been more in the Western League and in the even Sidney Crosby didn't have it. So I want to say that, no, they don't have it. This is wrong. This is a wrong list. Yeah, Joe Veleno was the first player to be granted exceptional status in the queue. I'm not sure that Sidney Crosby had it because Sidney Crosby did a year at Shattuck St. Mary's, if you recall, in any event, he's a really good hockey player with a really, really high potential. He certainly, there's no debating that he has not lived up to his potential. Again, Basu and Godin, good podcast episode where they interviewed Joe Veleno. You can get a real insight into the kid. He recognizes, that, he hasn't lived up to his potential. And, one hopes that, coming to his hometown will be a positive, and that he'll, maybe, live up to that potential. I mean, obviously, you don't need him to be, a 50-goal scorer, like some people maybe thought he was going to be when he, got exceptional status in the Quebec League. But a guy who, if he can come in and be a contributor, again, a bonus. You get him for nothing. Essentially, you're paying him, basically league minimum. You signed him as a free agent, and, there's no real risk here with Joe Veleno. And if he can contribute, he's still only 25 years old. First-round draft pick. Again, a guy who potentially could bring a lot to the team. Despite low expectations, right? Low expectations, high delivery. Those are the kind of guys that you want. So, anyways, guys, those are the new kids on the block. Veleno, Bolduc, and Dobson. All I think are poised to be contributors on the team. Obviously, more is expected of Dobson and Bolduc. But again, if Veleno can, find some semblance of who he's capable. I mean, that's kind of when you're with a young team, when you've got a young team and a rebuilding team, it often is about living up to potential, right? All of these prospects, all of these guys that you develop through your own organization or bring in, when you've got these young guys, it's all about, can they live up to the hype? Can they live up to their potential? And honestly, if all of the Canadiens players can play the way they're capable of, this is a spectacular hockey team, even now, right? If Veleno can play the way he's capable of, if Bolduc can play the way he's capable of, if Dobson can go back to being the 70-point guy, if David Reinbacher can be what we all believe he's capable of being, if Ivan Demidov can be the guy that he showed he was in the KHL last year and got him drafted, 5th overall, if Slavkovsky can live up to the hype and take that next step and play an entire season at his highest level. If Caden Gooley can stay healthy and be the defenseman that we know he's capable of and become, a Shea Theodore, Pietrangelo type guy, then, all of these things, it's all about question marks and potential, right? Some of them will, some of them won't, right? And so like right now, last year, for instance, Kirby Dach and Alex Newhook, didn't necessarily live up to their potential. Juraj Slavkovsky didn't live up to his potential in the first half of the season. All of the, Caden Primo obviously didn't live up to his potential last year. So some guys will and some guys won't. But the more that do, and the more that do well, the better. So let's get to one last question here from Tyler before we move on and end the show. A great comment here. The boys are ready to win. They are ready to show the NHL who they have. You can't teach and win at the same time. That's a Marty St. Louis quote. It's time. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that you need to be careful getting too far into the belief that the rebuild is over and that they're, whatever. But I think they're certainly at a different stage of the rebuild right now. Last year, I think, was a lot about learning how to win, right? The first half of the year, it was about, not shooting yourself in the foot, not making it easy on the other team. These are all, Marty St. Louis quotes, right? Not making things easy on the other team, not throwing up on yourself, whatever. But they were learning new systems and they were learning how to win. They were a young team. They were, they talk about maturity, being a mature team. Well, the only way you mature is through time and experience, right? The only, whether it's as a human being or whether it's as a hockey player or as a hockey team, the only way you can mature is by, the passage of time and gaining new experiences. And so last year, they became more mature through the passage of time and through the experiences that they went through as a team. And eventually they learned how to win, right? Last year we saw things like they would give up a goal, and then they would give up another goal, and then they would give up another goal, right? Because they didn't know how to deal with the adversity of that, that struggling. And so, and then eventually they figured out how to, knuckle down a little bit when they give up a goal, right? And so by the end of last year, we were no longer worried about the floodgates opening when they gave up a goal. Like more often than not, they were able to sort of then shut things down. Are you able to, to weather the storm when the other team comes out and, they're on fire and they're all over the place? Can you weather that storm and then sort of, respond with your own flurry, all that stuff. So, last year was about learning to win. This year, I think will be about learning how to win consistently, learning how to bring it every night, learning how to be the alpha, right? Taking your game to the other team, as opposed to going into a game and thinking, oh, we have to respond to their game. Like being the big dog, being the one who goes out there and says, no, they have to respond to our game, right? We're going to go out and play our game. And if they can't respond to our game, we're going to beat them, right? Taking advantage of your opportunities, minimizing the other team's opportunities, right? You're not going to win every night. You're not going to be the best team on the ice every night. But, do like that, we see that when they play against teams like Florida, when they play against teams like Las Vegas, when they play against teams like Colorado, those are teams that take advantage of their opportunities and they bury you when they get those opportunities. So anyways, guys, those are my thoughts heading into training camp. That's a bit of a longer show than we've become accustomed to. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed your questions, especially from you, Tyler and Dennis. I think it's going to be an exciting time. Like I said, rookie camp starts up next week. So we'll see the young kids first, then we'll see the prospect showdown, and then the golf tournament, of course, and then the real training camp. And then all of these questions that we've been asking will start to get answered, and we'll see how the team looks heading into camp, then heading out of camp, and then into the start of the regular season. So yeah, I hope you did enjoy the show. If you're watching in a replay, I certainly would be grateful if you would subscribe. The subscribe button is down below. Hit the notification bell. That way you'll get notifications when the show is live. And if you did enjoy what you saw, if you did enjoy the show, give us a thumbs up. That would be great too. Subscribers, we're getting closer and closer to 500. I believe we're 440 something. We're close to 450. It would be awesome if you would help us in that. We're working our way up to it. If you want to become part of this community, our goal here is to have intelligent conversations about the Montreal Canadiens, going a little bit deeper than the rumors and the sensationalized stuff. Going a little bit deeper than that and being objective about it. I do intend to. I think my next show, I've got some good guests coming on. I've got a national level prospect podcaster / broadcaster who I think is going to join us in the next week or two to talk about prospects and the NCAA CHL rules. I've got a doctor who I think is going to come on and talk to us about the medical aspects of different things with the Canadiens, whether it's Kirby Dach's injury and kind of those types of things or what have you. And then I want to do a show, and again, I don't want to get into a pissing match about this, but and I know this has been a hot topic for Canadiens fans in recent days, but I think I'm going to do a show about why Corey Pronman is wrong. And it's not going to be me, calling him names or getting personal or crapping on him. It's, again, keeping with the theme of the show, it's going to be an objective approach to why it is that he continues to underassess, misassess, get it wrong when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens and in particular their young players and prospects. So anyways, guys, all that to say, merci beaucoup. J'ai beaucoup aimé être ici. J'espère que vous avez aimé l'émission. Si vous voulez joindre à notre communauté, le bouton est en bas pour souscrire. Si vous avez aimé l'émission, donne un coup de... oh my God, how do you say thumb? A pouce, coup de pouce en haut comme ça. Thanks so much, guys. I hope you did enjoy. I certainly enjoyed talking with you guys and giving you some of my thoughts on all of this. If you do have questions and you are watching in a replay, feel free to put it in the comment section, and I will do my best to answer everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Signing off. Have a good one. Peace out. Whoa.
Pour un gars d'ici, être le directeur de général des Canadiens est une occasion d'une vie.
Enjoy the moment, you know, that, you know, you're in the NHL here.
Working for the Montreal Canadiens is a dream. La plus grande franchise dans la histoire du hockey.
If it was my last day on this planet, and you told me what would you like to do, I want to be in that building on a Saturday night.